it is more streamlined when it is live streamed for people who are viewing.
Amrita, we are live now.
Thanks, Asha. Yes. So we'll get started since it's 11:05. And before starting, I just apologize for having my video switched off. I am having some issues with my camera today, but I'm there, even though I can't see me. Okay, so welcome everyone to the Birding Buddies session for the January edition. Today we have the Nature Classrooms team who is going to take us through approach in nature education, an inquiry-based approach. And before we actually dive into the session, today's session, I'll just quickly introduce Early Bird to you all. For people who might be new to these sessions and who might not know what we do and what these sessions are all about. So yes, let me just share my screen. I hope you can see my screen right now. Okay, so at Early Bird, our mission is to make bird watching and nature accessible to everyone. And how we do that is through three different approaches. One is we create content. We have different educational materials and resources such as the pocket guide, bird posters. There are a lot of games and activities, art activities, that too in more than 10 regional languages. The next thing that we do is engage with the more educators and teachers through training or sessions like these, where we want to get to like work with educators and get them to incorporate such resources and such approaches, education approaches in their engagement activities. And a very small component of what we do is also engaging with kids directly, where we do online workshops for children, or we have done bird walks for them, and similar webinars that we do for children online with experts about different aspects of biodiversity and birds. And about this series of webinars, we want to, we've started these webinars, panel discussions, skill-based workshop and session to get educators to give them a platform to ask questions, discuss, even discuss challenges that they might be facing or share their experiences and learnings from different aspects of their nature engagement activities. If you have missed any of our previous sessions, you can check them out on our YouTube channel. We'll share the link to the playlist after. So that was about Early Bird. And to get us started with the actual session, today we have Priyanka and Veena from Nature Classrooms who would be taking us through the different nature, will introduce you to different nature learning components, but focus largely on the inquiry-based approach. And they'll tell us more about what it exactly is about and how you can go about it. Before I hand it over to them, just a quick introduction to what Nature Classroom works towards. So Nature Classroom works towards integrating elements of nature learning with the existing EVS curriculum in schools and learning spaces. They engage in the capacity building for teachers, educators, develop resources that are contextually relevant, and are involved in research that contributes towards making nature learning meaningful for teachers and learners. And since we have a lot of teachers in the audience today, we hope this is a very engaging and enriching experience for everyone. Over to you and Priyanka. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Amrita, for inviting us to your session.
I'll just share the screen. Yeah.
So like Amrita said, we will be focusing on one of the tools that we think is very important in the nature education space. And so it's something we're very excited and passionate about. And we've intentionally kept this session a little light. So it's more of an introduction session. We wanted to introduce you to some ways of thinking and give you some tips on how you can use an inquiry-based approach, during your sessions, when you engage with students or children, in the nature education space. So whether you do nature walks, or whether you have a talk in a school, or whether you are a teacher in a classroom, some of these approaches will be relevant. It's really nice to see a lot of teachers in the audience, like Amrita pointed out, and a lot of Montessori teachers as well. We borrow a lot from the Montessori way of teaching and learning. And so you might see that, there are some things that will click for you as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Swati, can you hear me now? Is this better? I'll try and talk a little louder. Yeah, so when Amrita approached us and said, okay, can you do a session for us, for our educators as part of this seminar series, Priyanka and I said, okay, this gives us an opportunity to also sit together and plan out a session, a 1-hour session, but we'll focus for about 40 minutes on this. How do we make it interactive, and how do we get you to think a little bit more on what this process involves? So we look forward to learning with you during this session as well. So we see it as a guided inquiry process as well during this session. So we will have, we will have opportunities.
I'm sorry, Priyanka, to interfere. We can't hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Premalata, is this better?
Your voice is still feeble.
Okay. Let me just do my audio settings once again. Can you tell me if this is better? Priyanka, is this better?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay, so let's go to the next. Oh, overall audio is low. I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on then. Let me try and talk a little louder. Not used to it, but I'll try. Anand, can I request you, because a lot of people have said that with the new Zoom settings, sometimes the audio doesn't automatically, correct for, a particular volume. So can you go to your audio settings in the Zoom? If you're joining through Zoom, just click on it to audio settings and increase the input volume. And just please tell me if that works.
And Vena, if you have a mic to your headphones, if you can just speak into it, that might also help.
Okay, let me remove my headphones. Wait, let me see if this is better. Please tell me if this is better. Okay, all right. My apologies. Okay, Priyanka, maybe go to the next slide. So as Amrita said, I won't give you too much of an introduction to nature classrooms, but we work with teachers and educators to get them excited about the natural world. And we do this, by doing training sessions such as this, workshops. We also create what we call locally, culturally, and age-appropriate learning curriculum that can be weaved into the current school curriculum. And we also are interested in designing research projects to help inform our work and to contribute to the space of nature education in India, right? And so we think we've come up with these nature learning components that we think are very important. So either in our approach or when we're designing resources, we use these components as our kind of guiding tools And if you'll have an opportunity to join us for a longer training session, we will tell you how we use each of these components when we are designing resources or when we're thinking about how we can impart nature learning and nature education. But today's session is on inquiry-based learning. And so we'll be focusing on that over the next 35 to 40 minutes. And then we'll open it out for group discussions and questions. So again, just reiterating, this is a very basic kind of a session. We will try and give you some exercises to get you to think about how you can think of questions and not in the traditional way which we're used to. And teachers in this group, please feel free to tell us what your experiences have been as well when using this tool in your classrooms. We'll also talk a little bit about the challenges of using a tool like this. And all of us, the first thing when we think about using a tool like this, we'll say, okay, but it's really difficult to do this in large groups. But can we think about that a little bit more, and can we unpack that and discuss how we can use this tool a little better? Next slide. So really, we're really lucky, right? All of us, I think, are nature educators in this group. We're really lucky that we have nature, as our kind of domain when we're engaging in teaching and learning, because really it's such a fantastic kind of a space, to think about, to learn and to engage in the teaching learning process. It's great for getting us and our students to wonder about various things. Nature easily makes us fascinated, and that's why all of us are here. There are so many kind of questions and that are so kind of that are there in our plate to use when we're doing nature education. So curiosity, connections, awe, inquisitiveness, and those aha moments, right? And so we're very lucky because we can pick up anything from nature and we can ask numerous questions around it. But what exactly is inquiry-based, learning and teaching?
Shall we get them to do the activity first before we?
Yeah. So we're going to show you a short video now. And then after we show you the video, we'll give you 5 minutes to write down at least 5 questions that come into your mind, right? So we don't want you to put it on the chat boxes yet. We want you to write it down. So if you can grab a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper, or scribble it on your, or type it out on your phone if you don't have one. Think of at least 5 questions that come to your mind when you see this video. Don't think about the answers, right? Only the questions that come to your mind. But what we'd also like you to do is to think of it logically, right? So within the realm of that video and the content that we're showing you, think of a logical kind of sequencing of the questions that come to your mind. So we'll give you 5 minutes to do that after showing you the video. After that, we will request you to share some of that on the chat box. So wait for us to tell you to share it. So don't put it on the chat boxes yet. This is only for you to do it independently.
I'll start the video. Just let me know if you can hear it and see it as well.
A chaffinch sings its song. As with 100 other chaffinches in this forest, it sings for the same purpose. It sings to attract a mate and to signal its territory to potential rivals. How loud and energetically a bird sings can tell others about how healthy it is. But not all birds are blessed with a good voice. They might instead perform elaborate dances to impress their partners. These dances range from the sublime to the ridiculous. Some dance in groups at a common arena, where multiple individuals practice and show off their moves. In some species, males and females perform a coordinated dance. Besides singing and dancing, some birds rely on bringing gifts to impress a mate. Hornbills bring presents of food for their partners, ripe berries or tasty caterpillars. Yet other birds show off their architectural skills, making elaborate structures that are then decorated with color-coordinated objects to impress their significant other. For weaver birds, a safe nest built high up on a tree or dangling over water increases their chances of attracting a mate. These skillful weavers are a delight to watch. And to add to all this, some birds attract mates by putting on extravagant and colorful outfits, complete with bright plumage and prominent feathers. Through song, dance, color, and more, birds continue the cycle of life, generation after generation.
So we'd like you to spend 5 minutes just writing down some questions that came to your mind. Try and go beyond the what and the why questions, right? We're very so used to thinking of the what and why questions. Think of the how, think of the what if, think of the will, would. So can you start your questions with some of those additional kind of words as well? So write down 5 in your notebooks. We'll give you 5 minutes to do that. Early bird team, I'd like you to also do the same exercise, please. So some of you would have seen this video as part of the Wonder of Birds course that Early Bird has put together. Amrita, I'll tell you a little bit more about that towards the end in case you're not aware of it. Think of this as a nature education tool that you'll be using. So Malaika, I hope you saw the video that we just showed you. We want you to think of 5 questions that came to your mind when you saw this video. Right? Don't worry about the answers, but or don't formulate your questions thinking that you need to come up with some answers. Just think of 5 questions that came to your mind and go beyond the why and the what questions. Think of the how, think of the what if, think of the would and will as well. Just come up with at least 5 questions.
Priyanka's put a note on what exactly is the question. Once you have your questions ready, you can start sending them in the chat.
No, not yet, Amrita. We'll tell
Okay,
them.
yeah, in 5 minutes.
Another 2 minutes. Okay, if you're ready, you can start typing out your questions. Just put 2 questions from your list of 5. You can start typing it out on the chat, in the chat box. Thank you, Chandrima. That's a lovely question. And you've used how, so extra points for that. Thanks, Yash. Lovely question. How does a bird adapt to a city? Very nice. Others, if you can write down at least 1 or 2 questions that you have written in your notebook. We're going to use this as part of the session moving forward. So please do write in your questions on the chat box. Thank you, Lavanya. That's a very nice question. Very nice question, Nijin. Another couple of minutes for others to write in their questions. As humans learn about gifting culture from birds, lovely as well. Okay, so lots of questions coming in. Very nice. Hold on to these questions. We'll try and unpack this a little bit more. So Priyanka, can I request you to share the screen again? Right, so many of us know, if we've either interacted with kids or have kids in our lives, kids are constantly asking questions. Students are constantly asking questions when they're very young. And sometimes you don't know what to say, because I'm sure that we were asking questions as well when we were very young. And as we grow up, most often our education system beats the art of or the joy of questioning out of us. Right? So unless we went to a really kind of alternate school or even a Montessori kind of school, I didn't have the privilege of going to an alternate school. I went to a very traditional school, like many of us. And so we're so used to a very traditional kind of teaching kind of a mode where you're just receiving information, and any kind of opportunity for questions or wonderment or just confused about something was not at all encouraged. And so often that art of thinking or of asking and for formulating something in our mind is something that we lose. And we, as nature educators, intuitively we know that this is a great tool to use. But often we need to practice ourselves how to use it. And so over the next few slides, we'll give you some tips and some kind of strategies to use an inquiry-based learning approach, right? So what exactly is inquiry-based learning, right? It's, in brief, it's a question-driven learning tool, right? It's not simply asking questions and receiving answers. That's not what it is. It's the art of actively engaging people in a process of asking questions and using those questions then to construct some new knowledge, right? So often it uses our innate sense of curiosity to come up with questions and as well. And very importantly, inquiry-based learning allows us to scaffold our learning, right? What is a scaffold? It's something that you build on what you already know. And in the co-construction of knowledge as well, right? Some of you may have heard of this term constructivism. It's basically using your own life experiences and experiential knowledge of a particular topic or a subject and building on that, right? So this type of a question-driven learning allows us to use our own life experiences to build on knowledge and to course correct as well when we're co-learning together. It allows for a very unstructured and non-linear learning, and research has shown how important this is for us to develop critical thinking skills. Right? So, and therefore, inquiry learning focuses on using questions and curiosity to guide the learner's efforts and even the teacher's efforts to figure out an answer. Right? So we need to push ourselves a little bit when we're engaging with this tool, and it's not easy, right? We have to learn ourselves somehow in terms of how to do it. So it's not, again, just to reiterate, it's not just a question-driven learning method. It's a way of asking questions and receiving information and building on those curiosity-based questions to come up with, a much deeper engagement of learning. And what better medium than nature to use this tool? So what we wanted to do now is we'll tell you a little bit, again, it's a little theory, but I think it's very important when we start thinking of questions like what you just did when we showed you that video. Very, very broadly, questions can be divided into these categories, right? One is very basic information type of questions, which are more factual or more procedural in terms of, how does this happen? Or when it has a very kind of a step-by-step process on what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. These are what are called lower level kind of questions, right? What we should strive for as nature educators are more of the wonderment questions, what we call wonderment questions, which are more of the prediction questions, application questions, things that, don't look like it's, going in a particular way and it's like, anomalous to what we're seeing. So, like, why is that happening here and not here? Something which elicits explanations and hypothesizing, right? So these are things which we have to strive for. So the basic information questions are good to start with, but we should try and move towards the wonderment part of the questions. And then very broadly, there are more open-ended and close-ended questions, which is very self-explanatory. So if you have a question which, which requires many kinds of iterations, explanations, wondering, and going back and forth, again, that's also a great way to reiterate the learning process. Or are our questions more close-ended, wherein we ask a question, we receive an answer, and we don't have an opportunity to go beyond that, right? So what we wanted to do now is, again, look at the questions that you wrote down after you saw the video and think of where your questions are kind of falling into, right? Don't worry too much, don't overthink this. Just kind of think, okay, are my questions more in the basic information kind of category, wherein they're seeming to be more factual or procedural? Or are my questions coming towards the wonderment thing? And if there's an opportunity to make a factual or procedural question into a wonderment question, what little tweaks can I do to it? We'll just give you a couple of minutes to think about this, and just to get you used to, just pushing you a little bit from your comfort zone. Thank you everyone again for your lovely questions. Very, very, very nice. And if you're using this tool, the video, the Wonder of Birds course, as part of your, outreach with students, or do put these questions down and develop it. Okay. All right, Priyanka, can we go to the next one, please? Yeah, Priyanka, over to you.
So now that we have some understanding of what inquiry-based learning is, Vena has given a nice introduction to how we think of different types of questions and the importance of cultivating that art within us. We just wanted to take you through a very broad process of how would you think about developing through questions and through the art of asking questions if you were to do sessions with, say, different groups, right? And just to give a bit more of an example-based approach to this process, let's take an example that we are doing a session on nests of birds with maybe different groups that you all work with, and considering, say, children, for example. So what are the different kinds of questions that we can build upon as we take them through the process of inquiry-based learning, right? So the very first level, and this we have also referred from the guide that's mentioned here, the very first level would be to think about building confidence, right? Often it's not easy for us to just come up with questions. And like Vena said, if you've come from a traditional system, we're often not also encouraged, to ask questions or ask anything that comes to our mind very promptly, right? So the initial level would be to build that confidence, right? Awakening that reflex to ask questions, saying it's okay to ask whatever is coming to you, like we tried doing today with the initial activity, right? And this stage is also about building the rapport, where even the learners are getting comfortable to come up with their questions, come up to you and say that I want to know about this, I want to learn about this. And often the goal is not just, again, about finding answers, but to understand through what lens are these learners looking at the world through, what is their experience and where are they coming from. And so if you were to take the bird's nest example, some questions that may be the base, like setting the base for further inquiry-based approach would be, have you seen a bird's nest before, right? And so again, constructing on their previous knowledge, what they already know, the experiences that they have had. Asking them to notice, giving the time for unstructured observation, asking them to notice, spend time, letting them come up with different things. Could be about the shape of the nest, could be about why the nest is here, but just allowing them to notice and acknowledge the different things that they're noticing. And also then asking them that, are they able to differentiate between what a crow's nest looks like, for example? Have they seen any other bird's nest? So also building on some of those factual and the basic information questions that we discussed about. Next level would be, once we know that the reflex is there to ask questions and being able to do that introductory, building them into the process of asking questions. And next would be to get them to think of edge questions, where it requires some level of searching, where maybe they need to talk to more people, maybe they need to research, maybe they need to spend some time observing and understanding the answers. So it's not just limited to telling them what it is, but also allowing them for that sensory experience, awareness, getting them to be a bit more hands-on as well, right? So why do birds build nests? Do all birds build nests? And also some of the amazing questions that you all asked in the chat also lean towards those edge questions, right? Maybe thinking also about what different materials do they think they use. Also, maybe one thing that can come in this stage could be empathy building. So if you were a bird, how would you think about building a nest, right? And again, this would vary in terms of the different age groups that you're engaging with and where the learners are in their process of understanding the topic or concept, right? And finally, once the edge questions are something that the learners are comfortable engaging with and are excited to know more about and have things that they want to explore further on their own, is when we reach the beyond the edge stage, where you're asking them to look for the not so obvious. And it's also to remind them that, there are things that may not be visible to us just through immediate observation, but things that require further, deeper engagement. So here we could think of more larger questions, like, do you think the size of a bird is related to the size of its nest? Or we could get into more ethics-based, moral, philosophical, those aspects of learning as well, right? Do you think why should we leave birds' nests undisturbed? Or what are some challenges a bird may face while building a nest? Again, relating to the age group. There's a very broad process format that we found. Of course, there are much deeper processes also that are involved, and we encourage y'all, if y'all can also read and engage more with this topic, because it's very, very fascinating to see how you can build upon the questions in the process. But broadly, the idea is that we begin by guiding them through the process of inquiry, right? So can we also, in return, question their thoughts, take their the thoughts and the things that they're noticing, can we use questions as a way to guide them to further ask questions till they reach a stage where they're able to do inquiry purely on their own. So that's broadly the process that that inquiry-based approach takes up. And so again, one thing which we asked you all to do in the activity is to think of the process and the sequence through which you asked your questions. Maybe again, you can try and put it through this approach. Are your questions sequenced in somewhat this format, or can they be sequenced, right? And so then what are some strategies that we can use to encourage question asking? And this, we'll share a bit about this picture in some time. Maybe Vena, you can add about this picture once we get into some of the strategies. But the idea is that the point of asking questions isn't always to just seek answers. Sometimes learners are asking questions because they want you to see the thing through their viewpoint, through their point of perspective, right? So the focus should primarily be on the discovery and co-construction of knowledge. And as you move towards together to asking those questions, you work on figuring out answers collectively, rather individually, or just by putting answers forward, right? One key thing is to be intentional of how we use the questions. And that's a core thing of inquiry-based learning, where it's not just about asking questions, but it's about how we structure those questions. How are we guiding them through the process of inquiry-based? So looking at inquiry-based as not just a question asking thing, but rather as a process that we want to adopt, right? Of course, comfort and confidence is key. I personally also often struggle to ask questions. So what are some things we can do to make learners comfortable who may not be able to vocalize their questions very quickly or often? What can we do to create such environments? Valuing questions, responses, and ideas. For us, many a times questions may not seem very advanced, or from the place that we come from, questions may seem too simplified. But taking that moment to acknowledge every question that comes our way, and what can we do for learners to feel that what they are trying to ask and find out about is valuable and important, becomes a key factor as an educator when we think about inquiry-based learning. Again, very important to think of the age and understanding of the learner when we ask questions, right? So that the learners don't feel discouraged from asking questions further. They don't feel discouraged from keeping that curiosity alive. It's important to keep in mind the age appropriateness of how we structure our inquiry-based sessions. And one of the challenges that we'll probably discuss later, but often that may come up in systems, in education systems like in India, where you have large groups, what are some things that we can do to ensure question asking is not limited to a few children? Maybe having a question board where you can display different questions. You can create peer learning groups where questions are being discussed within peers and they come forward to the educators. Encouraging them to writing down questions as and when they come up. Also, as educators looking for non-verbal signs, is there something that interests a student? Are they maybe observing something far more because that's spiking their curiosity? Looking for those non-verbal signs can also help us in understanding how we can take the inquiry-based process forward. Vena, do you want to add a little bit about the picture before we move forward?
Yeah, no, this is just a picture from one of the schools that we work with in collaboration with another long-term collaborator in 𝗘𝗿𝗃𝗃, which is in the outskirts of Bangalore city. This is a book that we, children's book that we put together on the biodiversity in and around their school campus. So what is it that a child sees when she is walking along with her mother from her home to her school, all the creatures that she comes across. And one of the things that the kids were engaging with it and asking questions, but this is, I mean, for some reason, the kids got really fascinated by putting the wings of these birds together, from two different books, and they were just endlessly curious about it. And we couldn't understand what they were trying to do, but they were, engaging it with it as an art form, right? And that's something we didn't at all look for, and we didn't even imagine. So we quickly had to, create some or think of some questions around that. And it was really, yes, there's nothing there book, yeah. And so it was a very interesting and fun exercise for us as well. We're hoping to write down some of these experiences in a blog soon on our Nature Classroom's website. So we'll let you know when that's done. Thank you, Priyanka. I just wanted to quickly reiterate that one thing about non-verbal signs. This becomes very important for students who are extremely shy and just don't like to talk, in a group or be put on the spot, or if there are, kids in the same group who talk much more and don't allow others to speak, we have to be careful to look for those little nonverbal signs to see how we can also include students who are not, used to emoting or asking questions. Thanks. Yeah, so what we'll do is just in the next couple of minutes, we'll quickly give you some tips on how to facilitate an inquiry-based approach. And we found this very, very useful. We have been finding it very, very useful, and we plan our sessions as well with teachers and with students also. So just some, it will seem like it's very obvious and basic, but I think we are in this session today to learn a little bit more and to think a little bit also, and actually, hopefully, this will help us in our future sessions. So there is research that has shown that giving students or our learners some unstructured time where they're not kind of we're not expecting anything from them, giving them some unstructured time helps them come up with many, many more questions. Right, so give them a little bit of time in the beginning of a session to come up with their own kind of questions when you take them to a place. Say if you're taking them to a lake, give them a few minutes to kind of say, okay, what are the questions that come to your mind when you're here? Right, so they're also kind of, then freeing themselves. They're also kind of excited to be part of this process. And there's research that's shown that students come up with many more questions when this little unstructured time is, and space is given to them. Make sure to kind of ask yourself, what are your goals and motivation for this particular session that you're doing? So if you're taking them for a nature walk and you only have 1 hour, and you have a specific kind of group of organisms that you want to introduce them to, make sure you have your goals and motivations listed, or tell yourself, and you make up questions based on those goals and motivations, so that the session doesn't veer off too much, right? And it's easy for it to veer off when you have such an open-ended kind of inquiry-based approach, right? Allow it to veer off if it's adding value to the overall kind of session. But it keeps you also grounded when you have your goals and motivations in mind. Writing down some questions before you start a session, right? So this can be again questions that you write or you ask your students to write after you've told them what your session is about. So again, if you take them to a lake and you say, okay, I'm going to introduce you to some birds that are living on this lake. Ask them to write down a few questions that come to their mind about, what would they like to know, or what is it that interests them, or what is fascinating them, what are they curious about, etc. Here is an important thing to do, though, right? To ponder and repeat questions with genuine interest, right? This really, really is a nice, like a silver bullet thing in our little, suite of tools that we have in our little kit. Do it with interest and genuine curiosity, as if you're thinking of that question for the first time. So if somebody comes up with a question, a student saying, oh, is it really? I didn't know that. What do you think we should do about it? Things like that. So don't put down questions by saying that, oh yeah, of course that's a duck, or of course it's a drongo. Repeat a question and ponder about it with your learners, because that really makes everyone excited then to learn with you. If you have the time and the space, keep some time aside to ask them to write the questions that come up in their mind during the session. Because if students are left with many questions, if a session is long, they often then don't engage in the process of learning, because they're constantly then thinking of this question they wanted to ask you or want to tell you. So one way to avoid that is to tell them, okay, I'm giving you 3 or 4 minutes now. Write down your questions that come to your mind. So do this in the middle of a session if you have the time and the space to do it. And very importantly, when you end the session, right, again, give them the opportunity to ask questions about things that puzzle them or something which made them wonder about it, which you couldn't cover in the session. And hopefully those questions will give you some hint in terms of what you want to do in the next session with them, or you give them that opportunity to do some research, around the questions that they are asking. Right? So it's like it helps in two ways: to get them to do their own research, but it also helps us to prepare for our next session also. So these are just some tips which we thought will be useful for you. One thing to keep in mind is, before doing all this, we need to practice ourselves the art of questions, right? And there's some very interesting tips and tools that we learned about, and we are hoping to practice as well in the work that we do, is to just actually make it a habit to pick anything from nature, right? Look at a tree, pick up a rock, or look at a bird, and write down the questions that come to your mind. It's again similar to the exercise we made you do in the beginning of the session when you saw the video. Write down the questions that come to your mind without thinking of what the answers are, right? And again, think of it in a logical sequence. Try and categorize the questions. Remember, we showed you how basic questions and fundamental questions, try and categorize them in some way. And you can come up with your own categories, right? Those are just some examples. Do this repeatedly, because like I said, the art of questioning in our teaching learning process as adults have been beaten out of us. We don't do it. We have so much information being put to us through social media, through news. We've stopped practicing the art of questioning and inquiry and just being curious about things. So we need to practice that ourselves in order to use a tool like this. So just to quickly summarize this before we give you a short exercise to do. What is an inquiry-based approach? It's nothing but the process of question asking and explaining that gets students or our learners and us to verbalize our ideas, to reflect on the thinking that we have been engaged in, right? Many of us, questions come into our mind or in our head when we're, even now you must be asking questions as Priyanka and I are kind of trying to facilitate this session. Questions are coming into my mind, whether the session is going okay as well. But we don't very often, we don't emote it. We don't say it out aloud. We don't think about it as much. So this kind of a process actually externalizes the mental activities that are usually covert, right? But it's also important to provide examples to ourselves and to our learners on what is the art on how do we form questions, and that takes some practice, right? And so we hope that in the exercise that we give you now, that you can do some of it using some of the concepts that we taught you today. Priyanka?
So just keeping in mind the time, since we lost some time in the beginning due to the tech issue, we'll try to give maybe 10 minutes to do this activity in addition to the closing Q&A that we usually have. Hope that's okay, Amrita, and with everyone, if we go a little 10 minutes over time. Basically, the idea of the activity is, I'm sure all of y'all are aware about the early bird flashcards. And we picked up one of those flashcards, which is of the Indian spot-billed duck, and we have put together a scenario for you. I'll just read out the scenario very quickly. You're taking a group of 25 middle school students aged 10 to 15 years to a lovely lake as part of a nature education session that you have been planning. This lake is home to many species of birds, including some winter migrants. You recently received a copy of the Early Birds, Common Birds of India flashcard set, and you're excited to use this tool as a part of your nature walk around the lake. You and the students notice a large group of spot-billed ducks on the lake, and you take out the species card from the set to engage with your group. We would like for you all to take just 10 minutes to use the image, and Amrita will display the image in a larger size. Use the image and information listed on the card and think about how you will incorporate inquiry-based teaching learning element as a part of this interaction, keeping in mind the process, the strategies, and some of the things that we share. Maybe you all can just take around 10 minutes to do it. And Amrita, maybe I'll just stop sharing my screen and you can take over.
Just a quick thing to think about. everything doesn't have to be an inquiry-based learning approach, right? It's just one of the tools that you can use, right? But since we're doing the session now, on inquiry-based learning, what parts of it can you make into an inquiry-based learning? There are some parts and some ways to approach it that may not be appropriate for an inquiry-based learning method. So you don't have to think only with that lens. Think about what will be useful to use an inquiry-based approach and what may not be as well. Many of you would have seen the flashcard set that 𝗷𝗶𝗍𝗃 has come up with. Many people use it as an education tool. It's such a fantastic resource in case you all haven't seen it.
I've shared the scenario and the question in the chat. And as you all are doing it, maybe closer to 12, Vena and I will also move towards the Q&A and the closing. Yeah, we encourage you all to put some of the things that come up for you in the chat. Amrita, is it okay if we take 5 minutes just to have this displayed and then we move to closing? Yeah. So in addition to questions, we also encourage you all to think of how you would structure the session as well. Maybe what is it that you would open with and what is something that you would end the session with. And these things are useful when even you are planning an inquiry-based session, because often it's not something you can just go into it, but requires some level of planning. And so that was the idea of this exercise, to get you all to plan a little bit as well. But yeah, please do share it as it comes up. Yes. In addition to the questions, we also encourage you all to formulate some strategies, both of it.
No problem, Anand.
Yes. Yeah, it's perfect.
Urging you to think of the process that we took you through, the 3 stages, and also the type of questions, and also some of the strategies that we discussed with you. Thank you, Swati. That's an interesting question. I think also that you bring up an important point wherein, what if we don't have tools like binoculars or hand lenses, for example, with us? how do we then, plan a session? Keep in mind also the age group that we highlighted in the scenario. Right? So these are middle school children, aged 10 to 15. So think of, whether the questions you're asking or thinking of are age appropriate as well, based on your experience. Very nice, Yash. Yeah. We're going to request the early bird team to actually document all these questions, because then we can use them as part of our, all of us can use it as part of the sessions next time. We can actually trial it out to see whether it's working.
Definitely. We'll be saving the chat, so we'll have a record of all of this, but we'll definitely pull them out of the chat in a different doc.
Because again, theoretically, it's easy to come up with these questions, but whether it actually works in the field with which group of children, with some group of kids who are again used to this kind of teaching learning environment, it might be easier compared to kids who have absolutely no opportunity or experience of engaging with this kind of an inquiry-based learning approach.
Maybe we'll just take a minute more. And you all can continue doing this. This is just a small example we thought we would bring up. But yeah, we encourage you all to think it through the resources and the groups that you all are already working with. Also think about, maybe if you're already doing nature education sessions, think about what are some things you would add to the approach that you're already having. Those things would be nice to work on as a takeaway from this session.
Chandrima, very nice idea as well. Can play a game of how long the ducks take to feed. Yes. It can become an investigative question. Yeah. Why are they called spot-billed ducks? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fun facts are also nice. Okay.
Very nice. I hope others are getting to read the questions as well and get some ideas. And that's the advantage of having like a group learning session such as this, right? I don't think individually we're going to come up with such interesting, diverse set of questions, but as a group, look at what we're coming up with. It's really, really nice. And we're again using our own experiences and our own understanding of the scenario to come up with these questions, right? So here is one example of constructivism kind of learning method. We're using our experience, we're using understanding of the scenario, and we're using an inquiry-based approach as well to come up with some kind of learning method.
Amrita, I'll take over sharing screen again. But yes, please do keep sharing if you all are still working on it. Just keeping time in mind. I think Vena and I will try and wrap the session, but we would love to keep still seeing those questions coming.
Swati's added a nice fun fact as well.
Yeah, I think that was a really nice idea. Adding fun facts, I think. Okay. Yes, Vena.
So we just want to open it out to ask you, as I'm sure many of you are already teachers and educators, nature educators as well. Often, the first thing that comes to our mind are the challenges of doing such an approach, because it is time consuming. It can be time consuming. It's difficult to do in a larger group with a larger group of students. Often we don't have the the opportunity to engage with the same group over long periods of time. So I just wanted to open this out, and you can unmute yourself and tell us and tell the group, if you have used such an approach, what are the challenges that you have faced while doing it? And we may not have the answers over here ready, of course, but it's something to keep in mind. And for us, maybe all of us as educators or nature educators, to work on it and say, okay, how can we go beyond those challenges? what are the kind of little tricks and tips and tools that we can use to at least trial out some parts of it. Yeah. Does anybody want to unmute and share their experiences with us?
You will be able to unmute yourself, but just
Oh,
to streamline the process, if you want to speak up, just you can use the raise hand function so that we can call out your name and then you can go ahead and speak.
Oh, sorry about that. I apologize. I didn't know that. Chandrima has her raised. Go ahead, Chandrima, and Malaika after that.
Yeah, most of the time I have done some of these. So I've usually done nature walks with students who are undergrads in my college. Um, I don't know what it is to handle smaller kids because I think their levels of getting engaged in such kind of spaces could be far more rewarding sometimes, but it's been a mixed feeling when you're dealing with a group of students who are kind of grown up with not observing so much. They really don't have that intention sometimes to observe what is happening around them. So just getting them to just observe is something that I have found sometimes very challenging. Just to go and observe. What do you see? What is it that what is it that you are seeing around you? And that itself sometimes becomes challenging. That is what I have seen, because they really don't want to observe. Of course, it's always mixed. There is a group of people who also like it, but there are also some people who don't like it. So for me, it's not always a group of people who are interested. So when you are dealing with a mixed group where some people are interested versus some people are not interested, sometimes just getting them to observe becomes a challenge, is what I have observed personally. Not that I have too many experiences, but usually when I'm always drawing up a curriculum, I always try to take them out, at least have one city visit, one field visit, where they're able to see and look things around them. But of course, when you're organizing a session, you know that some of the people who are coming for that session are the people who are interested. But when you have a mixed group, sometimes that can be very challenging.
Thank you, Chandrima. Malaika, you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Malaika and I work in Gujarat. I work in Savannah grasslands. In terms of nature education, we've been trying to do a few nature education activities in government primary schools in these grasslands. And for me, this session has been very, very helpful because upon reflecting, I feel like the kind of questions that the few questions that get asked from students are mostly fact-based questions. And I think just because of the kind of the ingrained learning where students are not able to freely ask questions, or they've been trained by their teachers of what questions you can ask or what you can't ask. Because of this, I think that kind of curiosity that this approach really helps to get into, we've not yet able to see that. And I would be very, very excited and interested to try and give the learner the space to be able to ask these questions. And also, as Veena said, that lots of students probably don't feel as comfortable or confident to even try and ask these kinds of questions. And in that sense, those non-verbal cues and other kinds of ways that to communicate, perhaps by drawing or other kinds of communication, I think that be interesting to be able to see as the teacher or the educator. Thank you so much for the session.
You can look forward to hearing about how you apply this tool. And I think all of us will be very interested to know how it works out. Of course, it will take time. It's not going to be an easy thing to do right away and see results. Also, Priyanka and I will share the relevant information from the session that we conducted today. So you have like a small document that lists out all the kind of concepts that we showed you today as well. So you can use it as a reference document. Yeah. Anand, do you want to go next?
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes, Anand, yes. Thank
So firstly, fantastic session. Really very insightful. As an educator in the field, uh, if it's a regular school or college teacher, like 𝗔𝗃𝗃 mentioned, then students at least will open up very quickly to asking questions. In our education system, asking questions is questioning authority. That's been the premise, and we are not really encouraged to go in for an inquiry-based learning. Rote learning and competitive learning, that's another problem. That till it doesn't turn into a competition, this group versus that group, somebody has to win. So self-learning, self-inquiry is something that we have not encouraged for generations together. So this is, as an educator, a huge challenge. That how do we break down this? The minute we tell them sit for 5 minutes and think to yourself, either they have to look at each other and see what the other person is doing, and they can't kickstart their own thinking process. There is just 5% of, the nerdy, the really smart ones in the class who will then hawk the thing. So that's one thing that, for a stranger to come in and then expect that they will start giving you quick questions, answers is one major challenge. So, that icebreaker part. So I think an indoor familiarity session and then an outdoor, a game-based learning, that kind of thing. And secondly, I think everybody is not very good with formulating either in writing or verbally. So that I have seen is a big challenge, that they do have thoughts in their minds. They do have these questions and queries that are there. So maybe sometimes, having visual or graphic clues which might be there and saying, point out, especially if they're early learners and things like that, non-verbal learners. I work with deaf children and others. Of course, that's another complete arena. But like even with, spoken, reading, writing kind of kids or teachers also. I've worked with teachers a lot. It's shocking when teachers can't come up with questions. Then how will children ever come up with questions? So, that is as a trainer's trainer, I think a whole training on just how to formulate questions. So this was like really amazing for me, that the process of how to formulate questions. I think that is something that we need to really focus on. And guys, do this as a session at SCCS. That's my, this is really a fantastic session for all. Thank you.
you. Yeah, and I encourage everyone here to also write down these questions as they come up, when you're doing sessions as educators. And Anand brought up a very important point as well, and we couldn't cover the session about deaf children, right? How do you kind of use a tool like this with physically challenged children as well? But just wanted to quickly tell you before we have to close the session, there is this really nice website called 𝗔𝗶𝗶𝗃. Encourage you to look at it. It was I don't know if many of you have heard of this books called the Small Science books. They're a fantastic resource to use if you're interested in education, nature education, especially for the primary school level. But just the process of how they designed the content and approach of the textbook itself will give us a lot of insight on how we can do sessions in our classrooms and outside the classroom. And they then, as part of this textbook creation, put up a website called 𝗔𝗶𝗃𝗃, where teachers and educators started recording the questions children were asking. And they put it as an open resource where everyone could answer those questions. So it was like a way of encouraging documenting of questions. I will request, so Priyanka has shared the links with you in the chat box. Do look at it and do contribute to it. And if you have the time, do look at the Small Science textbook. I highly recommend those books as well. Amrita, do we have time for Raja's question or?
We'll just take one last
Okay.
Raja as the one last person who's
And thank you,
already.
Anand, for your insights and for your questions. Thanks. Raja, go ahead, please. Raja, you're on mute if you're trying to ask something or share something with us. Yeah. Sorry, Raja, we can't hear you.
Hello.
Yes, Raja, now we can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Go ahead, Raja.
I am 𝗷𝗍𝗃 from Hyderabad. It is a very good session for the educators. I am actually not an educator, but I am a resource person for biodata. This biodiversity data I am uploading through 𝗦𝗽𝗆H𝗆. I have a problem that particularly when I want to upload some of the flying, say, birds or insects, they perch for a few seconds, 1 or 2 seconds. By the time I focus, they go away. So, is there any good mobile to capture the flying insects or birds? I want to purchase new mobile for this purpose, for contributing the biodiversity around me or wherever I go.
Raja, thanks for your question. It's a little bit outside of the scope of the session that we're facilitating today. But what
I
we'll
know,
request-
yes, that's
yeah,
true.
what we'll request you to do is put down your email address on the chat box. And
Okay.
one of us will get in touch with you through email to tell you,
Okay.
to give you some tips on what you can buy and how you can document the biodiversity around you better.
Can I share with you, to
Sure.
Madam Priyanka?
Yes, sure.
You can just put it in the chat. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Raja.
Thank you very much.
Amrita and Varsha, over to you. Priyanka.
Yes, just wanted to thank everyone. We've added the 2 resources that Vena mentioned, the links in the chat. We'll also share some of these links post the session via an email. And we would love to also get your feedback for which Amrita has shared a form. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And we hope you keep the curiosity and the wonderment in you alive as always. And we would love to hear all the things that you all do going forward.